everyone, and welcome. Thank you for coming out this evening. We are excited to have Dr. Templeman here with us tonight. Before we move forward, I want to give a brief overview. My name is Kathy Dedman, and I work for Welcome as an ASD Children and Youth Transition Support Worker. I'd like to thank Giselle Fellow from Children's Aid Society of Oxford County, who unfortunately is unable to be with us tonight. Welcome and the Children's Aid Society of Oxford County work collaboratively to support the community, families, and caregivers assisting individuals diagnosed with high-functioning autism and Asperger syndrome. We have a strong passion for autism both professionally and personally. Each day we feel fortunate to have somebody with autism touch our lives in one way or another. We learn so much from the children, youth, and families that we support. They truly are our mentors. Our goal is to provide education to the community to learn, accept, understand, embrace, and see autism through a different lens. This is Lisa Craig, who will now introduce Dr. Templeman.
Hi, I am a mom of a child who is on the spectrum, so I'm really looking forward to Dr. Templeman's speaking this evening. So Dr. David Templeman, if you've read his bio when you saw the posting, he's a child and adolescent psychiatrist, completed his medical degree at the University of Alberta, and then went on to do his residency from the University of Western Ontario. So he's won numerous teaching awards, and he's qualified as an expert witness in child and adolescent mental health by the Ontario Supreme Court. And he's also a strong advocate for children's mental health in his area. So in 2011, he published the book, A Teenager's Guide to Life, The Secret to Living Life and Being Happy, which is available in paperback, and also you can download it by any teenager free of charge from his website. And he's currently working on another book, which sounded pretty interesting to me, titled Kids Instruction Manual, the one they didn't come with. Dr. Templeman currently has a private practice in London. He has 3 older children who are pursuing post-secondary education, and he and his wife enjoy raising them so much that they now have a newborn child at home, which I think they're saints for doing. He's one of the most accessible child and adolescent psychiatrists in Canada, and he has a wait time of only 3 weeks, which is amazing. So those are for those initial assessment consultations. So he's in such high demand that he does not have patients. He doesn't see patients in follow-up. So basically information on how to get a referral to him, as well as the downloads for his book, can be found on his website at www.drtempleman.com. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Templeman.
All right. Oh, that's loud. Thank you. So what we're going to do today is, first off, we're going to take a look at information processing in the brain at a very basic level, basically giving you guys an overview of how the normal brain works to regulate our behavior. And then from there, we're going to step off into how the child with autism's brain is different than the regular brain and how it processes information differently and the impact that this has on their functioning and daily lives. So to start with, we're going to understand the brain. Now when you're trying to understand why people do the things that they do, what is it that makes us act, that makes us choose to come to an evening and spend our time listening to somebody as opposed to staying home in bed and eating cookies? What is it that makes us want to go and sit in front of video games instead of go and hang out with our friends? What is it that makes us want to buy this dress or wear those clothes? At the end of the day, it's actually a fairly simple equation. When you look at what makes us do the things that we do, there are basically 2 driving forces in our brain that regulate our behavior. On the one side of the brain, you have the harm avoidance drive, and on the other side of the brain, you have the pleasure-seeking drive. Now, the best way to think about these 2 drives is to think of them as though they were 2 separate individuals that are sitting there in your head, giving you instructions, telling you what to do, how to do it, when to do it. Now, I'm sure most of you remember those days back when they had little cartoons and you'd have little Billy standing there in front of the windowsill and Grandma would put the pie out on the windowsill and little angel would pop up on Billy's shoulder and say, "Don't touch the pie, Billy, don't. Grandma said don't touch the pie." And then the little devil would pop in and go, "Oh, come on, Billy, eat the pie, no one cares." And then Billy would try to figure out, what should I do? Well, it's kind of like that, except that in the cartoons, you know, little angel, little devil are meant to represent the good and the bad choice, the right and wrong choice. In our brains, there is no good or bad, there's no right or wrong. There is only one goal that both of these two sides of the brain share in common, and that is survival. But they both go about it in a slightly different way. On the one side, you've got one that ensures survival through making sure that we don't run into problems that are going to kill us. And on the other side, you've got part of the brain that ensures survival by making us go and get the stuff that we need to survive, like food. Now, to make it very clear, and because I work with kids, I've given them names and faces. I call them Jim and Bob. And Jim and Bob basically play us like a puppet on a string every day of our lives. From the time we're born to the time we die, these two guys are in our head and manipulating us and controlling us. So, first guy we're going to talk about briefly is Bob. What does Bob do? What's the purpose of Bob? How does he work? Bob is the part of the brain that is designed to notify us of when there is a danger in the environment. So what he does is he monitors the environment using all 5 of the body's senses. He pays attention to everything that we see, hear, taste, smell, touch, feel. And he constantly filters through all of that information looking for bad stuff, looking for something that he knows is dangerous. And if he runs across any of those bad things, what he does is he takes over control of our body and he forces a behavioral reaction, and that reaction is going to be whatever he thinks it needs to be to avoid that bad thing. So to give you an example of what this would look like in average everyday adults, let's say that I have arachnophobia. What that would mean is that Bob, in my head, believes that spiders are deadly and dangerous and could kill me. So if I had arachnophobia and I'm sitting here having a conversation with you and a big old hairy spider suddenly twirls down and lands right in front of my face, how am I going to react?
Scream.
Yeah, I'm going to do something kind of like that. And how many of you startled, jumped, and moved back at the sound? But the thing that's important to pay attention to that reaction is that right at that point in time as my brain noticed the danger, what it did was it forced a behavioral response, a very quick, instinctive mental reflex, if you will, to keep me away from danger. It forced me to take a step back, away from the danger. Normally the hands are going to go up to throw up that shield. You scream. Why? To summon somebody else that's going to come help you, because obviously you need some assistance to deal with this thing. And the problem with this is it's not just that it's a quick mental reflex, but it's a very powerful one. And it's one that is out of our control. Because if I had arachnophobia, even if I knew this was just a harmless house spider that couldn't hurt you, let's say it's a daddy longlegs, not even a spider. So if it's a daddy longlegs but I have arachnophobia, am I going to be able just to walk up to it and go, you know what, I know it's harmless. I'll just take it, carry it outside, and let it go live? No. That would be beyond what I could do, because Bob is sitting there in my head saying, don't touch that. You touch that, you're going to die. You will die. So he refuses to let me do that. Now, the things to understand about Bob is very fast, very powerful, but he has a limited lifespan. He gets tired very quickly because he puts all of his effort into controlling us into this very quick burst. So when he takes over control of our body, he cannot maintain control over our body for an extended period of time. But the longest that Bob can stay in control of our body is about 45 minutes, give or take 15 minutes. It really depends on each child, and it's based on catecholamine degradation in the brain. But the important thing to realize is that he cannot stay in power forever. Now, bad things, that's an interesting one. How do we know what's bad? Well, bad things come in a couple of different flavors. You've got the things that are automatically encoded, that we know are bad, things that we're born with. And then we've got other things that we learn are bad. Now I want you to pay attention to this little clip. What strikes you as very interesting about this group of friends that's being attacked by this ravenous monkey that's going to kill them? Take a look at girl number 2 as she runs away. Good friend, huh? Yeah, it's attacking us. I'm going to grab you, throw you to the wolves, so I can get away. Now, of course, that wasn't what she was thinking at the time. At the time, she was just thinking, I need to get away. But Bob knows that if you're being attacked by a wild beast, there's a much better chance that you can escape if it already has a meal. So to ensure survival, let's throw our buddy off to the wolves, and then we'll get out of here. But bad things are the things that we are automatically born knowing are bad, and these are pretty generic things. Things like big things, dark, things that, evolutionarily speaking, actually do represent a very real risk for us as human beings. But the most important way that we learn what is a bad thing is through experience. Our brains are hardwired to adapt to our environment and to learn to recognize what is a bad thing through experience. So what that means is that, let's say one day you and I are walking down the street, and as we're walking down the street, a big angry pit bull comes charging out of the neighbor's yard, starts barking, and then bites my leg. If that was a very bad thing for me, if I didn't like that and I found it very unpleasant, my brain is suddenly going to take an instant snapshot of all of the sensory input associated with that very unpleasant experience. So it's going to pay attention very quickly in a rewind mode to everything I heard, saw, tasted, smelled, touched at that time, and it's going to put all of this stuff in the list of bad stuff to watch out for next time. Because obviously something in that list of sensory input was definitely related to that bad thing. Now, if I've got a very good Bob that pays attention to things and is able to understand stuff, which, by the way, Bob doesn't do, then I would know that I should just be afraid of the neighbor's pit bull. But that's not what happens. What happens is I start to be afraid of dogs, or all four-legged furry creatures. Or if I've got a very determined Bob to keep me safe, I start being afraid of going outside, or being on the sidewalk, or being near you because you were near me when this happened, or listening to this music that I was listening to while it happened. So the problem with Bob is that he's not a very smart machine. He is just a machine. And he has rules around how he encodes information, and he follows those rules very dedicatedly. Now, over time, because of experience in life, that list of bad stuff grows, and grows, and grows. And soon, depending on how good of a Bob you've got, you can have a huge list that includes just about anything and everything you could run across, which could leave you not doing anything or avoiding just about everything in order to keep yourself safe and to protect you from dying. Any questions about Bob and how Bob works? Everybody understand that basic principle? All right. So moving on, we're going to go to Jim now. So the way that Jim works is much the same as Bob. Jim's job is to make sure that we go and we get the stuff that we want and need for survival, things that are essential. Food, water, warmth, physical contact, Xbox One, PS4, the new iPhone, all the things that you simply cannot survive without, right? Now, I say that tongue-in-cheek, but not really. I'm sure some of you have tried to take the Xbox from your kids and see the outcome, and they'd much rather starve to death than have that happen. But the reason that all of these things get encoded in the same part of the brain is that they're all related to the brain's one neurochemical for good stuff, which is dopamine. So what happens in the brain is if I like something, dopamine is released. How much I like it is determined by how much dopamine is released when I experience this. So if I'm suddenly hear a new song on the radio and I really like it, that means that the auditory activation of my acoustic nerve triggered the release of a lot of dopamine. If I sit there and go, oh, I hate that song, that means that it activated noradrenaline and serotonin release through Bob. So these are all about neurochemicals at the end of the day. But anything that I like goes through the same dopaminergic process. And the thing about dopamine is all my brain knows, again, because it's a machine, is I need dopamine to survive. So if this is a source of dopamine, then this is essential for my survival. And I cannot do without it. So he does the same thing as Bob, uses the 5 senses, pays attention to everything that he sees, hears, tastes, smells, touches, feels. and looks for good stuff. And when he finds something that he likes, what he does is he locks onto that source of dopamine like a little homing missile. And he is going to take over control of the body, and he is going to force the body to do whatever it takes to get that good thing. Once again, to give you an example of what this looks like in us, average everyday adults, this part of the brain is the reason you can't stop at just one chip. You know, those brownies that you're sitting there going, I really shouldn't. Mm-hmm. President's Choice Decadent chocolate chip cookies, horrible things. This part of the brain is the reason why people laugh inappropriately at times when they shouldn't be, because something really funny happened. And they can't help it. This part of the brain is the reason why people need to win, need to get that last word in, need to be number one. Because being number one is a survival thing, it's a good thing. It's also the part of the brain that's responsible for people being unable to quit smoking, for people getting addicted to things. So what is it that people like? Well, again, that can be a very interesting thing. Can anybody name some of the things in here?
Ted Bundy.
How'd you know there's Ted Bundy?
I just watched the documentary. I couldn't stop watching it.
So, things that you like can be anything. Anything that releases dopamine in your brain. Now, one of the characteristics of kids on the spectrum is that sometimes that can be very odd things. Things that you wouldn't expect would release dopamine, and for the rest of the world, we're going, what? Why? How do you find that interesting? But they do, and they like it. And the only thing that really is important to understand is that what people like is what people like. They don't dictate whether their brain releases dopamine or not. It's just an automatic response that happens. So if me sitting there and biting my finger releases a lot of dopamine, my brain goes, let's do that a lot more. If me spinning in a circle releases dopamine, my brain goes, let's do that a lot more. If me hanging out and talking with somebody releases dopamine, my brain says, let's do that a lot more. Whatever it is, it's just got this hardwired neural response that says we need to do more of that. Can anybody name that dinosaur? Extra points if you know what kind it is. How many of your kids might actually know that? I've got a nephew who can tell you exactly what that dinosaur is and how much it eats in its own weight and what period it came from and all of that stuff because I'm fascinated by it. So the thing about Jim is that he doesn't work quite the same way as Bob does. He isn't a super fast responder, but what he is a very powerful responder. You know, when you are hungry, you might need food now, but you can wait. But what happens if you wait for more food? Haven't eaten yet. It gets worse. You get hungrier and hungrier and hungrier until it's the only thing you can think about. So the way that Jim works, it's different than Bob, is whereas Bob shoots quickly but then fades, Jim can start relatively quietly, but over time he just gets louder and louder and louder and louder until he gets what he wants one way or the other, and he won't let anything get in his way. At the end of the day, there's no saying no to Jim. Jim is always going to get his way, no matter what. Because to not eat is a guarantee that you're going to die. Not just a maybe, not just a might, it's a guarantee. So he will do whatever it takes, shut down whatever it takes to get what he wants and needs. And this can be sometimes a very useful strategy for parents when they're trying to deal with anxiety, with kids who have fears of things, which a lot of kids on the spectrum have, and I'll explain why shortly. Because if Jim needs to shut Bob down to get what he wants, he will. If you pit them against each other, even though initially Bob might win because Bob goes louder, stronger, faster, Bob is going to fade. Jim is just going to get stronger. So if you wait, Jim is always going to win that fight, no matter what it is. So if I need them to go to school, if I need them to go into that room, if I need them to do something that they're afraid of doing, I need to have something that's in there that they really, really, really want, and they can only get if they go in there. And then I need to take a step back and wait. And if I do that, and all they're doing is sitting there being bored, waiting to get that thing, eventually they will do whatever it takes to go get that thing, even if it means going through the thing that they were never going to do in their whole lives. And it gives them the necessary exposure, which is a necessary part of overcoming any anxiety or fear. So let's talk briefly about anger, because anger is one of those things that tends to cause parents an awful lot of problems when their kids have tantrums. What is it that triggers anger? Well, anger is 9 times out of 10 the responsibility of Jim, and it occurs in a very specific situation. It occurs when Jim has locked onto that source of dopamine and is heading for it, and somebody or something gets in between him and what he wants. It's a very hardwired, basic, instinctive reaction designed to increase our strength, increase our power, increase our ability to smash through whatever obstacle is in our way. And that's exactly what happens. The only other time anger comes into play is the responsibility of Bob, and it is a minority of the time, but it happens only when Bob is scared, has tried everything he can to run away, is trapped, and there is no way out, and now he's got no choice but to fight for survival. And that kind of anger is very reactive, in that it's only going to happen when there is that threat that comes nearer. If the threat goes away, so does it. Jim's kind of anger is going to continue until he gets what he wants. So here's what it looks like when a kid doesn't get what he wants. Gotta love the French. This is a French company. They put this out as their TV commercial a few years ago. But right there, you've got all the classic signs of Jim-driven anger. I want something, you're not letting me get it, I'm going to do whatever I can do to get it. And in that particular case, what was he trying to do? He wasn't trying to physically go past that. What was he trying to do? He was trying to embarrass Dad into giving it to him. You know, he made as big of a scene as possible, made sure everybody knew what was going on, so that Dad would hopefully cave. And of course, you saw all the other parents looking at Dad, going, what is it with your kid? Like, what kind of a parent are you? As Dad sits there, he goes, yeah, what do? Do I give it to him to get out of here and save myself the embarrassment, or do I not? The problem is that if Dad gives it to him, his brain learns, much the same as Bob's brain learns to see what's bad. Jim's brain learns what's good and how to get what's good. So if I've tried a strategy that works to get me what I want, I'm going to do more of that next time because it's going to work even better. And so I start repeating the behaviors that got me this in the first place. So when you're looking at what is it that controls behavior, it's actually a pretty simple equation. Between these two central drives in our brain, you're looking at what is the balance of the volume of either of these two parts of the brain at any given point in time. Right here, right now, what does my brain perceive more of? Is there more danger in the environment? In which case, Bob is going to be the one that's in the driver's seat? Or is there more pleasure in the environment? In which case, Jim is going to be the one in the driver's seat. And that's pretty much it. Up until you hit puberty. Because once you hit puberty, there's a third player that joins the game. And that teeter-totter of behavior control stops being a teeter-totter and becomes a teeter-totter with an observer. And that observer is the thinking part of our brain. The part of our brain that understands what makes sense. The part of our brain that knows stuff, that makes the world need to make sense, that asks the question why and wants an answer that actually is logical and makes sense. You know, the other term that we have for this third part of the brain is willpower, self-control. Those two concepts represent and embody this third part of the brain's ability to override Jim and Bob if need be. Now this part of the brain, the thinking part of the brain, doesn't actually turn on until they hit puberty. Up until then, it is just Jim and Bob. So depending on the age of your child, explaining to them why this is a rule, why this makes sense, why they should do this, is really just a waste of your time and their time because they don't really understand or care why. Now a lot of parents say, but my kid asks me why all the time. Well, that's because it's a fun game to play. If I ask you why and you say, well, because of this, and then I go, yeah, but why? Well, okay, well, because of this. Yeah, but why? Boy, they're really smart. No, they're just playing the same game that you play with them. You know that game where you sit there and they've done something and you say, why did you do that? What do they always answer? I don't know. And of course, as a parent, you're like, how do you not know? It was you, your paint can, the cat. How do you not know why you painted the cat? I don't know. Because I did? Well, that's not good enough. We want a logical reason, as though there could ever be a logical reason for that one. But we ask why, and there doesn't need to be an answer. We keep asking them why, so they just do the same thing to us. But they don't really understand what it means, because they don't think in the same way that we do. They don't understand what makes sense or not. How many of you actually go through the trouble of wrapping Christmas presents in different wrapping paper and then having different handwriting so that they don't recognize the similarities, so that they don't go, And if they're younger than puberty, what does that tell you about all your effort? Pointless.
Yeah,
Because they don't care. They could have exactly the same wrapping paper, exactly the same handwriting. One says from Mom, one says from Santa. They're like, yay, yay. Doesn't clue in. Doesn't make any difference to them. But right around 11 or 12, when puberty starts to kick in, their little brains, if you didn't start being clever about it, start to kick in and they go, huh, wait a minute. That's the same wrapping paper. What does that mean? I don't know. I think that's important though. And they start to question it, and it starts to become puzzling. And then they start asking that question of Mom and Dad, which is it? Yeah, but they don't really want to know the answer because they don't really want to destroy them either, but they're kind of wondering, saying, I've never seen a flying reindeer. Is that really true? And how many of you believe that you should never, ever lie to your kids? Because, of course, we lie to our kids. We lie to them all the time. Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, all of these things are lies. But it's for their benefit, so we don't ever feel bad about that. But when they first ask you that, you've probably got about a year left. After that, no, they're going to figure it out themselves, and it doesn't matter even if you try to keep up the rules, they're going to sit there and go, really, Mom? Santa, I'm too old for that. I had one kid come in, and he was 11, and he said, I don't believe in Santa, you know. I said, why is that? He goes, reindeer don't fly. I said, is that the only reason? He goes, yeah. I said, well, you know what you're missing? He goes, what? I said, anti-gravity booties. You didn't realize that reindeer have special anti-gravity booties that make them fly good. Oh. Cool. So Santa does exist. Very simple when they're at that initial stage to get past it, but you try pulling that on a 20-year-old, good luck. By then their brains go, what do you think I am, 2? So this thinking part of the brain is an important part of the brain once you get to be old enough for it to actually be useful, which for most people is around mid-puberty, when they start to be able to actually make choices, to actually make decisions about what to do, to override or to push past those emotional things that drive us. And how good we get at using this depends a great deal on how much did we practice doing this when we were teenagers. When our brain was young and malleable and could learn all sorts of stuff, how much time and effort did we put into learning how to be in control of Jim and Bob? Compared to how much time we just let Jim and Bob run the show and leave it up to them. And if we did that, then we end up as an adult that still can't really control Jim and Bob, no matter what. And we all know adults out there like that. We all have moments like that, where we know we're being irrational, we're being silly, we're scared of this, scared of that, we get upset over this, we say things we don't mean, and we regret it. But why couldn't we stop ourselves? Because it's hard to do. The problem is, logic and reason takes a lot of energy and effort. You know, it's something that is difficult to activate for us. And it takes time and practice to get good at it. So that is the triangle of control of behavior. That's the normal brain. Any questions about this whole setup before we move on to children on the spectrum? Yes?
What kind of dinosaur was that?
You'll have to look it up. I actually have it written down on the screen over there, because I don't know, I think it's a Paleotelosaurus, something like that. I'm not entirely sure. You know, I knew some of the other stuff, some of the other lore. So, kids with an autism spectrum disorder, what does that actually mean? Above and beyond just the diagnostic criteria that are in the DSM-5 or the ICD-10, what does it mean if a child has an autism spectrum disorder? What it means is that the part of the brain that is responsible for herding behavior, that is responsible for letting us as individuals know that we are part of a group, something that is there from the minute we're born. You know, how do the ducklings know they're supposed to follow mommy duck in a line? Who taught them that? How do sheep know they're supposed to stay beside each other and move as a herd? Who taught them that? I mean, these are very primitive animals, and they know this within the first day of life. How did they learn that? Well, they didn't learn it. It was a hardwired function in their brain. And what happened is their brain woke up, was born, and went, you're like me, you're like me, you're like me, okay, we do the same thing, cool. And that rule was there from the start. Kids on the spectrum don't have that rule there as a starting point. And that is the source of where everything else starts to go wrong. All of the symptoms that we see, all the things that make up the diagnostic criteria stem from this primary fundamental issue with the brain. Because so much of what life is, of what we do in life, comes from this component. We first need to recognize that we are social creatures to be able to understand the social world. We need to recognize that we are social creatures and that there are others like us in order to be able to communicate with them or to even see the point of communicating with them. We need to see the point of communicating to learn their languages, whether it be English or French or Spanish or body language or facial expressions. I mean, even sheep know facial expressions. You have a predator that comes along on one side of the herd, the sheep that's closest to it will see it, will get a scared look. That scared look will ripple through the rest of the herd until it gets to the alpha. The alpha will then say, okay, we need to go in this direction because I know that it came from this direction. How did they figure that out? It's just hardwired. And away they go. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on which way you look at it, humans are a herding species. We do the same thing. We are hardwired to do the same thing. We are hardwired normally to find our group. We are supposed to be around people like us. It is supposed to be one of those fundamental things that is hardwired, that gives dopamine to our brain, to be around people like us, to communicate. And furthermore, we're supposed to be terrified of being alone. If we're alone, we have no protection. I mean, let's face it, evolutionarily speaking, we are squishy. We are a very squishy species. If it was just me against a saber-toothed tiger, I'd be gone. If it's me and my 20 buddies, now we stand a fighting chance. And that is why, evolutionarily over the millennia, humans have evolved to be a herding species, because the ones that didn't come with everybody else that sat out there usually ended up getting eaten, because it was a dangerous world. It's not a dangerous world out there anymore for people who are not in a group. You know, we have changed, times have changed. And as a result of times changing, evolutionarily speaking, the things that are necessary for survival have also changed. And so we are seeing a shift in the population. And this is a very real shift. There are a lot more people being diagnosed on the spectrum now than there have ever been in the past. And it's not just because people are sensitive to the diagnostic criteria. They are just increasing in incidence and frequency. And all the scientists can't explain it. They're looking for explanations why. Maybe it's evolution of technology. Maybe it's something in the water. Maybe it's something that they ate. Maybe it's something that they took. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But the reality is that we don't actually have anything concrete that we can say it's definitely this reason, but we do know that it is going up. So what does it mean if we don't do these two things? Well, it actually means a lot. It means, for starters, we don't understand what it means to be in a group. So even though a child with autism is born into a group, and instantly the parents try to bring them into the group, try to make them part of the group, their little brains just kind of look around and go, what? I don't get it. What are you doing? Why are you touching me? Why are you looking at me? Like, who are you? I'm the same as you, I'm just a bigger version of you. No, you're not. I'm the only one that's me. I am me. And these kids have a very strong sense of individuality. You know, they really, really want you to know that they are them. That they are not like everybody else. They are not just one of a crowd. They are them. And it is very true that they are. But it means that they don't connect with people in the same way. They don't rely on people in the same way. They don't care about people in the same way. Now, understanding what communication is a very important part of understanding this disorder, because communication is one of the most important things that we do as a group that allows us to survive in a group. So in order for us to coordinate everything as a group and to be effective, first off, we need a boss. We need a leader. And once we have that leader established, whoever that happens to be, what they're going to do is they're going to tell the rest of us what to do. And we're going to listen to them, because that's just what you do. You follow the leader. You do what the alpha does. So you follow that social hierarchy. And no matter where you go in history, no matter what countries you go to, there's always a social hierarchy, because it's a very real construct and phenomenon. These kids don't get that. They don't understand why you, as mom or dad, have any authority to tell them what to do. And they're certainly not just going to listen to you because you said so. What kind of dumb person does that? You know, they are not sheep. They're not just going to sit there and you can ask them and say, you know, I would like to do that. And they'll say, well, I would like to not do that. Okay, but I'm the boss. No, you're not. I'm the parent. So that means I'm the boss. No, you're not. You have to listen to me. No, I don't. Now, historically, we had a different way of forcing them to listen to us. We could, you know, beat our kids and no one would care. Sometimes, actually, that's what they recommended. You know, they just need a good source of discipline. And in those circumstances, you could activate Bob. You could activate fear and unpleasantness, in which case it would go, okay, yeah, you can hurt me, so I'll listen to you, I'll do what you want. But once we step away from that, and as a society we've decided that, you know, hurting kids as a way of controlling them is not a good idea anymore. It's not acceptable. How do we get them to listen to us? how do we get these kids to do what we would like them to do, what we know they should do, if we can't scare them into it? It's a very good question. Remember, there's two different control mechanisms. There's Bob, but there's also Jim. We'll talk about that in a minute. So they don't understand social hierarchy. They don't understand communication within that hierarchy. You know, what does it mean when you say this to me? What does that look mean? And what about this emotional stuff? Because one of the classic features, as you all know, is that there's a distinct difference in the way that they emote. They tend to not emote more than anything else. They don't show emotion. Most of the time, they're very neutral. Not a lot phases them a lot of the time. Or they're on the other extreme, which is they are way too emotional about little things, and it's like there's no volume dial to that emotion. And that's exactly right, because there is no volume dial to their emotions. They are not wired the same way that we are. Because emotions, at their core, are nonverbal communication. They are a way for us to send a message to the other members of our group very quickly without needing to say a word about what's going on with me, what I need, what's happening, based on facial expression, body language, all these things. And that's an emotion. They don't pay attention to that. They don't know what that is, so they don't use that. They don't use it in the proper way. And this gets to another problem that you tend to run into, especially in the higher functioning ones and as they get older, which is even though they are very intelligent quite often, and they know how to speak, and they know words, and they know definitions of words because they can read the dictionary, and they often do, they don't really know the meaning of emotional words. They often mislabel emotions, and they will actually be angry. They will say, I'm anxious. They will be anxious and they will say, I'm upset. They will be sad and they will say, I don't know what I am. They will be excited and they will say, I'm anxious. They will be horrified and they will say, I'm excited. And I had a kid sent to me for assessment simply because when they learned about the Holocaust, he went up to his teacher afterwards and he said, wow, hearing about that was so exciting. Like, that was exciting. Like, she's like, what, the Holocaust? Everybody died? He goes, yeah, didn't that excite you? The teacher got very concerned about that. What do you mean? He meant, like, my heart was pounding and I felt really weird and bad, which is also how he feels when he gets excited, so I figured that must be what it was. But if you ask him a further question, like, so do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing? He goes, that's a bad thing. Well, I mean, he doesn't do it with all the facial expression I'm doing with it. It's more like, that's a bad thing. But, wrong word. Got him into trouble because of that, because he just used the wrong word, and people assume that they know what words they're using. But a general rule of thumb when dealing with this is, if they're using an emotional word, make sure they're actually talking about that emotion, because they may not be. You know, the number of kids that I have where the parents say they're very anxious. Why? Because whenever I turn off their PlayStation, they freak out. Okay, anxious is scared. Anxious is Bob. What is it that happens when you turn off something that they want and they forget? That's Jim. That's angry. But they say, you know, I can't live without it. I need it. And they have these meltdowns. So maybe it's a panic attack. Not. But that's often what it gets called. Why? Because they said that. A lot of kids coming in saying, I have anxiety. What do you mean by anxiety? I don't know. Why do you say you have anxiety? Because that's what they said I had. Who said that? Teacher at school. Okay. Why do you think that that's true? I don't know. Do you know what it means? No. So what's the problem? I don't like school. Why don't you like school? Because video games are more fun. Okay. So video games are more fun. Why does that have anything to do with school? If I'm in school, I can't play video games. So I have to be at home to play video games, so I get myself into trouble so I can play video games because I don't like school. Are you afraid of school? No. School's boring. So then, you're not actually afraid of school? No. So this is not anxiety at all. But the kid isn't going to school, resists going to school, so everybody says, well, they must have anxiety. But the kid doesn't know what anxiety even means. So the emotional language is an important thing to understand. Social learning is something that they do not do. And they do not do this in a very long-standing way across time. Social learning is learning based on the people around you. Normally, social learning occurs in two different methods. Number one, my brain knows that if I see you do it, I can copycat you. It's called monkey see, monkey do. For these kids, it's not monkey see, monkey do, it's I see a monkey, whatever. And off they go. My nephew, he has this problem. At 13, he came downstairs and excitedly, as excited as he gets, said to his mom, "Mom, did you know that you can use a towel to dry yourself off with?" And she kind of looked at him, blink, blink, and said, "Yes." He goes, "How come you never told me that?" She's like, "What do you mean never told you that?" I had to watch a movie, and I saw a guy using a towel, and he was like rubbing it, and I thought, why is he doing that? And I tried it, it dries you off. And she's like, "So what have you been doing all these years?" "What you told me to do, which was to cover myself when I go from the bathroom to my bedroom with a towel." Because that was what she told me to do with a towel. She said, wrap a towel around, you can't just run around naked. And for years, it's just annoyed the heck out of her because he would make her whole carpet soaking wet because he'd jump out of the shower, be dripping wet, wrap a towel around, and then go into his bedroom. And it also drove her crazy because it would take him about 45 minutes to an hour before he'd come back out dressed. She's all like, "What are you doing in there?" And he's like, "Drying." Air drying. Never dawned on him that you could use a towel. Never dawned on her that he wasn't using a towel because she's like, "We have a pool. How many times have you seen us drying ourselves off?" He goes, "I've never seen that." Of course he has. It just never registered in his brain as relevant to him. Normally, the brain would see somebody doing something and go, "Oh, what does that have to do with me? I could probably do that, yeah." To them, they see you doing it right in front of them, and even if you say, "Look at me, do this is important," they'll go, "What?" So they don't learn by observation. She said, "Empty the dishwasher." He said, "Where's the dishwasher?" This was 11. She said, what do you, how can you not know where the dishwasher is? It's right there. "Oh, is that what that is?" "Yeah, what do you think we're doing when we're putting dishes in there?" "I don't know." So do you think we just have like a little dish pygmy under there that does it? "I don't know. Never thought of it. Doesn't care." Nothing to do with him, what everybody else around him is doing. So they very much miss a lot of fundamental information that you think they should know. And so sometimes though, even though they're brilliant in some ways, they can astound you with the stuff that they seem clueless about, that like, you've got to be kidding. Like, how seriously, you can't really not know how to do this. Except they don't. And they often need very explicit instruction. Now the reason why at about 14 is when this happened with my sister, is because when they hit puberty, what happens in the brain is normally there is an increase in that social part of the brain, and it amplifies its abilities and makes you very keenly aware of the social interactions and stuff, and makes you pay attention to that because puberty is the time when you need to go find your mate. Biologically, this is when you need to pay most attention to people. This is when you need to be able to figure out who's going to be a good partner, who should you end up going out with, who should you date, who should be your buddies, so that you can figure out your group independent of your family of origin. So normally there's a big jump in expectations of social interactions and social skills. For these kids, the jump usually goes from minimal, if any, to a little bit. And that little bit sometimes causes a lot of problems because they don't have the previous decade of experience to understand what it is. And suddenly, when they're hit puberty and they're teenagers, they suddenly care what people are thinking, sort of, and they don't like people looking at them because they figured out that looking at people actually means something. So if you're looking at me, it must be, I don't know, just don't do it because I don't even want to try to figure it out. I don't know how to figure it out, but don't do it. And so they can look like they have a lot of social anxiety at that point in time, but it's not actually true social anxiety, because it's not that they're expecting that they're being judged badly, it's that they think they're being judged, period. It could be good judgment, it could be bad judgment, they don't care. Your job is not to judge me, I have nothing to do with you, I am me, don't do that. And it upsets them. Because they still don't really understand that whole grouping thing, what it means, how it works. And sometimes they get to the point where they actually do want to be in a group, but they don't know how to do it yet. They don't have the skill set to figure out how to interact with people properly. They don't know how to recognize the nonverbal communication that all their friends are going to be doing around them. And unfortunately, they tend to make people uncomfortable around them. And in the normal brain, if I'm very uncomfortable around you, it means that it's a bad thing, and I should stay away from you. So unfortunately, society does tend to not react well to them, does tend to push them aside even when they want to, because it doesn't understand what's going on with them, and it's different. And we are hardwired to recognize different as maybe not so good, right from the get-go. But one of the things these kids are amazing at compared to the rest of society is being accepting. They really don't care who you are. They don't care whether you are the lowest rung of society. You don't care if you are the king. To them, they will treat you all the same. And that's great for anybody that's in that lower rank, and it pisses off the king to no end that you're going to treat me the same as you treat your little buddy. But that's what they do. So they're very non-judgmental. You know, they will go stand up for the underdog. They'll stand up for anybody because they can be friends with anybody. Even if they've treated them badly. So what? Doesn't really matter. Doesn't mean anything, does it? Well, it actually kind of does. And one of the biggest risk factors for these kids when it comes to puberty and adolescence is that they are at risk of being taken advantage of by the other socially normal kids that recognize their gullibility, that recognize that they don't think in the same way that they do, that they don't understand what's going on, that they don't pay any attention to intention, that they don't know when they're being manipulated, and they use them. And a kid came to me because he'd been charged. What he'd been charged with? Well, from the way he says it, for holding on to a friend's backpack. How did that get you in trouble with the police? I don't know. Well, was it a stolen backpack? No. So what was the problem? I don't know. Mom's like, yes, you do. He goes, no. No, I don't, Mom. I didn't know that was in there. What was in there? A whole ton of marijuana. Who was his friend? Some kid that ran down the hall and said, quick, put this in your locker, and if anybody comes by and asks you, tell them it's yours. He said, okay. Never dawned on him to say, wait, why would you be doing that? And of course, 2 minutes later, the principal and police officer from school come down and they see the backpack. They're like, is that yours? They're like, yep. And of course, Mom gets a call and Mom's like, that is not, no, trust me, my son does not do that. It is impossible. And she gets her and she's like, this is not your backpack. And he goes, I know. She's like, well, why did you tell them it's your backpack? Because my friend told me to tell them that. Well, who's your friend? My friend. Well, what's his name? I don't know. Well, how do you know he's your friend? Because he said he was my friend. So how does he not know that this person isn't their friend? Because friend is a social label. So social labels associated with hierarchy, they don't understand, much like emotions. They don't know how to tell if someone is a friend or not in the same way that we do. To them, friend is, I know you, or we do stuff together, or I like you, or I like the way your hair smells. It could be any number of things. But we need to find out from them because we can't just accept at their face value that whoever they're saying is their friend is actually a friend. And as parents of kids on the spectrum, we need to be aware of that, and we need to be cognizant of the fact that we need to stay involved in their social lives to help guide them through this time so that they don't end up getting into trouble with the wrong people. They don't end up getting taken advantage of because they need our help in that area. So let's talk a little bit about communication, because this is where being on the spectrum really affects everything. Communication is at the core of any relationship. How do I know that my wife likes me? Well, she communicates it to me one way or the other, whether it's non-verbally, whether it's verbally. I know that because she's told me that. If she had no way of communicating with me, how would I know if she liked me? How would we even have a relationship? It's a challenge. If I tried to communicate with her and she refused to communicate back, what does that mean? Come on, you guys know this one. You go up to someone, you try talking to them, and they just kind of stare at you and say nothing. What are they actually saying?
The hell is?
Right. But are they actually saying that? Well, yes and no. That's the problem. Nonverbal communication happens all the time. It is constantly on, and our brains are constantly interpreting nonverbal communication. The problem with kids on the spectrum is that they don't generally use nonverbal communication with any intention. They don't read it, and if they don't read it, they sure as heck don't know how to use it properly. So whereas someone who does understand it, if they said nothing to you, would be sending that message. Someone who doesn't understand nonverbal communication may be sitting there thinking, trying to figure out, what should I say? But while they're thinking that, and 20 seconds have gone by, it's too late. The other person has already gotten the wrong message, has reacted negatively, and they still don't know what's going on because this person was friendly 2 seconds ago and now they're saying they don't like me and they're telling me where to go. Like, and I didn't even say anything. Well, that's the problem. You didn't say anything. Well, but see, they don't understand that. How could that be what did I say? What did I do? Nothing. That's the problem. By saying and doing nothing, you are sending a message. And they need to learn about some of the subtleties associated with this to avoid the bigger problems associated with it, because they don't use nonverbal communication in the same way that we do. And it is not fair to them to assume that they know the rules of what they're saying and doing and how they're doing it. These kids work well with words. Other aspects of communication, not so well. So if you want to make sure that they've gotten the message, or that the message you're getting is direct, you need to pay attention to the words that they're saying. Exactly the words, because that's usually exactly what they mean. The problem with words is that words have context. And that context comes in the form of body language. You know, if I'm sitting here and I say, okay, the word is okay. It's very different if I sit there and go, okay. Or very different than, okay. Or, okay. All very different meanings. One word, very different contexts. Depending on the severity of that problem with their recognition of this stuff and how much they've actually learned, they may not recognize any of the differences in those and may think, oh, someone said okay. You know, if someone says, okay, yeah, I'll go do that right away. Thank you. No, I'm not going to, but you just said you're going to do that. Yeah, being sarcastic, what does that mean? Well, that's when you say something, but it's not what you mean. Well, don't do that to them. That's just mean. Because they don't get it. And sometimes parents go, oh yeah, no, we have a very sarcastic family. But they understand it. You ask them, they're like, my dad's mean. Why? Because he says mean stuff to me all the time. And to my sister, I don't know why she doesn't hit him. Like what? I'll tell you about my nephew. I like this one. So his older sister went off to university and came back home. And she's like, I'm home for the holidays. And Dad comes up, gives her a big hug. He goes, what? Already? I swear, it's like you just left. We barely even had the chance to enjoy you not being here. So when are you leaving again? She's like, ha, Dad, big hug, blah, blah, blah. 2 hours later, at dinner time, they're talking, and out of the blue, he turns to his sister and says, so when are you getting out of here? We don't like you and don't want you here. And she just goes, wait, what? And he's like, what? why would you say that? She got all upset, and he was like, what? I was being funny. No, really not. But she laughed when Dad said it. So he figured he could just say what Dad said, basically, and it would still be this funny thing that she would laugh at it, and it was meant to be a joke. He didn't mean it. He actually likes his sister and liked having her there. But that started a big problem. And I had to get on the phone with my niece and go, okay, I need to explain something to you about him. Because she was just like, he's a horrible human being. I said, no. He's still your brother. This is not what he meant. He just doesn't know how to do that whole jokey thing. Well, then why did he try to? Because he's trying to be like you guys, and he's trying to assimilate. It's going to be a rough go of it sometimes, and you can't pay too much attention to it. And despite all this, he's now 19 and off in college. When he finally was heading off to college in September, his mom's giving him a big hug, and she's like, oh, I never thought you'd actually get here. And he's like, I always knew I'd get here. She's like, I'm so glad, I'm so proud of you. He goes, yep. I'm so glad I never have to come back and see you again. And my sister, again, was just like, what? And why would you say that? He goes, well, it's true. I never have to come back and see you again. Isn't that something that makes you happy? Why would I be happy about that? I thought you wanted me to be able to be independent. I do. What does that have to do with you coming back to see me? Well, I'm just telling you that I know how to be independent now, and I don't need to come back and see you ever again. Well, why wouldn't you come back? Well, of course I would come back, Mom. Why wouldn't I come back? Well, because you said you would never have to come back. Well, yeah, I would never have to come back. Doesn't mean I don't want to come back. I just wouldn't have to come back. What is the problem? Very literal, very concrete, not understanding the implied message there. And again, the words were not, I'm never coming back, but that was the message that she got. And it was the message that most of us would take, unless we remember that we can't read into what they said. And so we always need to take a step back and have this pause in the processing of information, especially if we think that they're saying something that is out of character for them, or that they're doing something that doesn't seem like it's appropriate to the situation. Because they may not be making the mistakes that you think that they're making. Pragmatics. Pragmatics are essentially the verbal equivalent of punctuation. And they make a really big difference in how you interpret things. Pragmatics helps you understand the difference between let's eat grandma and let's eat grandma. Is there a difference? Oh yeah, there's a difference. Absolutely. As far as grandma's concerned, there's a big difference. They may or may not even hear the difference in the tone of voice. Because if their brains aren't trained to listen to those subtle inflections, those subtle shifts, they don't even pick up on it. I often use that example with kids, and about half the time, they just kind of look at me blankly and I say, was there a different message? Like you said the same thing. I said, did I say it the same way? Yeah. Did it sound different to you? No. So saying, let's eat grandma, and let's eat grandma. What do you mean different? Does it sound different? No. So you can't hear the difference in but they can't. So they don't pick up on it. So they can misunderstand what you say, even when it's just about the words. So it causes a lot of difficulty, and probably the most important characteristic that as a parent, a caregiver, a teacher, a professional can have when dealing with these kids is patience and stop and think. Pay attention to either what you're saying or what they're saying, and recognize that there is a communication barrier here that you need to be aware of, even though they may be perfectly intelligent, English-speaking, native English speakers. They're not really native communicators, even though they're English speakers, because there's so much more that goes into it than just the words that you use. Implied information, they rarely ever get that. You know? Because you know what we're doing, right? What? You know, right? What? You know, I was talking to a mom the other day, and she said, so what do you think the problem is? I said, well, because she's got 2 older kids that have already been diagnosed, and this is going to be the 3rd out of the 4. I said, well, and he really did not want to be diagnosed, so I'm talking in a circular way. I said, let's just say that you no longer have 3 kids, or 2 kids on the spectrum. Mom goes, yeah, I do. I said, no, you don't. Yeah, I do. So what's the diagnosis? There's no longer 2. There are now 3. No, there's not. Okay, Mom, we're going to need to excuse him so I can have a conversation with you. Because I need to be a little bit more concrete here. Why is there such a high number of her kids on the spectrum? Because this is a genetic problem. This is very much a genetic problem. This runs in families like you would not believe. And if there is more than 1 child, either you're really, really unlucky or it's unrecognized in somebody up the family tree, almost guaranteed. You know, I do this for a living. I found it odd that, okay, my other nephew, my nephew, and so I sat and went, that's a lot of nephews here. And so I had to stop and think about it, and I'm like, wait a minute, Grandpa, oh my God, it never even dawned on me. We always just called him, you know, a different word. Because he was not really a nice guy, had no filter, always spoke his mind, and was oftentimes very rude to people, and, you know, didn't really care about people all that much, so we all just knew that Grandpa was just this interesting character. But never dawned on me, and this is what I do for a living, you know. So sometimes it is unrecognized, because when it's in your family, you just know your family is your family. But it is important because one of the things that is helpful for these kids is early identification. Recognizing at an early age that this is a problem means that we can intervene and help them sooner. Because it's not that they can't learn how to do these things, it's just that their brains are not hardwired to learn it, and they're not going to learn it automatically. If we spend the time teaching it to them, they can figure it out. If there isn't an intellectual problem or a learning disability associated with it, they've got a normal intelligence or more, they can figure it out if we teach it to them. But we have to teach it to them explicitly. We have to spend the time doing that, and that takes time. So the longer we have, having recognized this earlier, the easier it will be for them if we do that. And so if it does run in the family, then it is worthwhile paying attention to the kids, the next generation, the grandkids, so that we can help them sooner rather than later. And I've been doing this long enough that I've seen the 3-generational model all the way down. And it's Grandma, who initially brought, you know, daughter when she was 6, who daughter's now got a child. And Grandma's like, yeah, I see a lot of the similarities. Mom isn't going to see it because one of the key features of recognizing that they're different means you have to recognize that you're in a group. You have to compare yourself to the group. If your brain doesn't do that, your brain never picks up on the fact that somebody else is different than the group, because it just doesn't think in terms of group and differences. So Grandma brought them in and said, yeah, I think that's the case, and it was. But it meant that she could start getting help at a very early age. And that is very helpful and beneficial to them. I showed that to my nephew, and he said, I don't get it. He said, is it funny because it's a chicken? I said, no, it's not funny. I mean, yes, it's funny because there's a chicken, but it's funny because what it says. He goes, oh, I get it. The guy's not a cook, so he shouldn't be using a chicken. No, No, that wasn't it. It's got to do with chill. He goes, but the chicken looks chill. I know, but that's not what it meant. But very literal sometimes. Facial expressions. How hard is it to do this? The first one, are they disgusted or are they sad? They're sad. The second one, are they angry or are they afraid?
Angry.
Is there a really big difference between the first and the second one? Not a ton. As a matter of fact, it's very little difference, but when you look at it, instinctively your brain goes, yeah, no, that's different. No. I can show these pictures to kids that come in and they're like, I think it's the same girl. Well, it's definitely the same girl. What's the difference? They're like, there's no difference, it's just one's a little bit bigger than the other one. Like, no, there's a difference in the facial expression. Pay attention, like try and dissect it, and they're like, I don't see it. And they don't. It's subtle. Bored or sleepy?
Bored.
Bored. Interested or disinterested? Interested. Interested or disinterested? Interested. At which point in time they go, but the other one was interested. Yeah. How can that one be interested too if the other one's interested? Because there's not just one facial expression for an emotion. There's a variety of them. Well, how am I supposed to remember that? And that's the difficulty, is they're trying to memorize these things, which takes a lot of time and energy and processing. And when they're interacting with people, when they do know how to do this, they are thinking and using that thinking part of the brain. They're not reacting emotionally. They are thinking and processing and trying to figure out, okay, what does that face mean? What is that happening? What's happening over there? And what that means for them is that being around people is actually a lot of work. It is exhausting to be around people and to talk to somebody because you're supposed to look at their face and know what's going on. And that takes a lot of thinking. And that's exhausting. And when they're done with that and they're exhausted, they just want to come home and just not have to do that anymore. So I get on, you want to know about my day, but go away. I've been doing this all day, I'm exhausted. Well, I just want to find out how your day was. You know, you're just asking them to run another marathon after they just ran a marathon. And they often don't have any interest in doing that, but it has nothing to do with their relationship with you. It's got everything to do with they are tired. And they need some downtime. They need to be able to recuperate. And when we throw them out there into the social world and we force so much social interaction on them, as you all know, the last thing in the world they want to do with their free time is go out and socialize more. They just want quiet, me doing my own thing, because that's not hard to do. Being around people is hard to do. Assuming I'm not even unhappy about it, which sometimes I am because I'm misunderstanding and misinterpreting a lot of stuff. But even when it's not a bad thing, it's still a tiring thing and an exhausting thing. And if you throw in other relationships, so now it's a romantic relationship, that becomes even more tiring. You know, the number of these kids that have relationships or boyfriend or girlfriend that are online and they've never actually seen them is amazing. And why? Because they much prefer that. First off, if they get tired of them, they can just push the button and it's done. And then they can always say they had a power outage or their computer crashed. And that's often what they do. You know, they're talking, so I just push the button. And I had this one kid say, why don't people have a button you can push? And I said, oh, people have lots of buttons you can push, and believe me, you push a lot of them. He kind of looked at me and went, what? Mom, he had no idea what I was talking about. Why? Because it's a figure of speech. Figures of speech are not actually the words that you mean, it's the implied hidden meaning. And it's really just about the eyes when you think about it. Even just the eyes and no other part of the face. The first one. Are they friendly, sad, surprised, or worried? Friendly. What about the second one? Are they remembering something? Are they happy? Are they friendly? Are they angry? They're remembering. The third one, are they feeling sorry, joking, relaxed, or are they trying to make you do something, glaring at you? Right? And that's just the eyes. You don't even need all the rest of the stuff. And we don't even need to study this. Our brains just know this. And so we assume that everybody gets it, but they really don't. And that is always important to remember. What do you guys see in there?
Nothing.
How many people cannot see the sailboat? At all?
No.
Do you know what this is a test for?
Colorblindness.
Colorblindness.
I know.
You're colorblind.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Yeah, exactly. Would you expect to be able to see this if you knew you were colorblind? No, because you know that you're colorblind. You know you're never going to see the boat. I'm right with you, buddy. Never seen that dumb boat. I've been using this slide for 15 years. I know there's a boat in there somewhere because everybody tells me there's a boat, but I've never seen that boat because I'm colorblind. And even though I'm intelligent, and you think, well, how can you not see this? I mean, it's so obvious. How dumb do you need to be to not see this? You don't need to be dumb at all. You just need to have a brain that doesn't process certain types of information. And color information is one of the things that my brain doesn't process properly. So I could stare at this all day long for years and still not get it. But it's not because I'm dumb. It's because my brain just doesn't process a certain aspect of life. It's the same thing with these kids. For these kids, I often describe to them that they have a social blindness. They just don't process the social information in life. It's not that they're dumb, because a lot of times they get down on themselves because they can't do this. They can't figure it out. Or people tell them that they're dumb, or tell them that they're mean, or that they're rude, or that they're annoying, and they have no idea why, because they don't figure that out. They don't pick up on it. And it's really not fair to do that. So we need to understand that it's not something that they're trying to do, or that we have a right to get upset at them for when their brains just can't do this. And we need to see them in a different light. One of the things that is often comorbid with kids on the spectrum, but not always there, is a problem with imagination. What is imagination? As a process, imagination is when your brain creates a mental visual image or a movie of something that it's never seen before, of something that doesn't exist. The most common places that you will see people use imagination are with tasks like reading a book. How do you know what's going on in the book? Well, that's easy. You read the words turn into the movie in your head, and it's interesting and you're reading. The number of kids on the spectrum who find reading the most annoying, boring thing in the world, well, that's a clue that you might want to check into this, because reading can be boring if there's no picture up there. You know? What's the point of reading words? Well, because what pictures? Well, you know, like, don't you see what they're talking about? No. Well, the character. What was the character going to do? How would I know? Imagination is also used to predict the future, something that we all do every minute of every day. Our brains are constantly predicting the future in order to try to help us in little bursts. You see somebody over there that's turning this way, your brain goes, ooh, what if they turn this way? That could be bad, so we should probably do this. Your brain sees somebody asking a question, and it goes, oh, I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to make sure that I sink a little bit lower, that way I don't get embarrassed because he's going to ask me. Why does your brain think I'm going to ask you? Well, because it just played that real quick scenario in its head. You know, your brain comes to one of these things, and it thinks, what are we going to talk about? When are we going to say this? When are we going to say that? Who's going to do this? So our brains are constantly using our imagination to help prepare us for the world. Also very important when it comes to making decisions, because to make a decision means I can predict the future. I can tell what is going to be a good choice, what is going to be a bad choice. I stand here at this fork and I say, if I go down this hill with this, what could happen? And my brain plays it forward for me, and I see, yep, no, sharp turn there, no brakes, okay, that could hurt, I'm not gonna do that. Over here, ooh, brambles, yeah, no, that could, I don't have the right clothing for that, that could be bad. So we know what to avoid, we know what to chase, because our brains help us with that information automatically. We don't even need to think about it, our brains give us that information. If a child doesn't have an imagination, they don't do that. And that means that you run into a child that can't make a decision. Can't make a decision for the life of them. Even simple things like, what candy do you want? I don't know. Well, just pick one. You pick one for me. Well, why you pick one? This is your choice, it's candy. Which one are you gonna like? Going to like, that's the future. If they don't already know they like one of these, they have no idea what they're going to like. They can't imagine what this tastes like or what that tastes like. They can't imagine what that flavor is going to be like if you mix it with this, or so they really don't know. Well, what do you want? They don't know, because to want is an emotional reaction to this imagined future. I want this outcome versus I don't want this outcome. So they often get very stuck when faced with choices. And part of the criteria that you often see is they like things to be the same. They really like things to be the same. They don't like changes, because to adapt to change, you need an imagination. You need to be able to see and predict what's going to come up next in order to be able to roll with it and figure out what you should or shouldn't do next. And if they have trouble doing that, then any change is completely unpredictable, even if it's a small one, because they can't play it forward and see that that change is actually insignificant in the grand scheme of things, because it's really not going to impact the outcome. You can't do that. So any change is bad, very bad. Going back to that very basics thing of different equals bad, and what Bob does and says. So imagination is one of those important things. Now some kids, they've got it to a certain degree. Some kids, it's something that if they really try, they can visualize and create pictures in their head of certain things. But for a lot of kids, it's just not there at all. Now, this is very different than memory, because memory is just, can you pull up a picture of something you have seen? Can you remember what happened? And they've often got phenomenal memories. And they can pull up those pictures of everything that was said and done. You know, if they say, you said this, I'm fairly certain that those would have been the exact words I said. It may not have been exactly what I meant to say or the intention, but you know, my nephew, if he says, oh, don't you remember last year? What day was it? Tuesday? Well, I'm pretty sure it's Tuesday, and I've looked it up many times. He's always right. He knows the days of the week that we were down visiting. It's like, I don't even know that. But he remembers this. He goes, I know it was Tuesday because I did this on that day, and that's when I did. How do you remember that? I don't know. How do you not remember that? Because I'm old. Oh, Uncle Dave, you're not that old yet. My mom said that you're not that old. So that's because your mom's a little older than me. So, being able to remember stuff. The problem with memory, though, is it's fixed. It isn't changeable. Imagination is changing things, and you can teach them how to use sort of a type of imagination by taking memories and then breaking it up into its component parts and reassembling it in a different way. You know, if you can't imagine what a crazy, weird dog, cat, bird hybrid would be when they describe it in the book, well, you know what a dog looks like? Yeah, so you've got the parts of a dog, you've got legs, head, body. Can you just kind of separate those out? Sometimes the answer is no. The dog is a dog, you can't take it apart. Sometimes you're like, okay, take a cat now, take a bird, and just pick one of those parts and stick it on there, and presto, now you've got that amalgamated picture. And sometimes I do this actually in practice. You just get a picture, you cut it up, and you can see, this is what part of it looks like, and now we take this, we stick it together, now you've got that picture. I'm like, oh, I get it. So we can teach them certain things if we know that there's a problem with this stuff. But imagination is very difficult to assess at times, because if you don't have it, you don't really know what it is that you don't have. You just know that you get really confused when the teacher says, "What do you think Billy did next in the story?" Or when the teacher says, "Tell a story about what you did in the summer," or what you would like to be when you grow up. They don't know. This task requires imagination. What this task is a series of boxes, and as you can see, there's each numbered box. You have a series of levers. All of these are rigid and a type, and you got pivot points. And the goal of this is to figure out if you push down, for example, here, if you push down on this lever, what's going to happen to these two levers, to those two endpoints? So to do that, you need to be able to, in your mind, see this bar going down, which means that this one's going to come up, which means that it's going to push this one down, which means that because that's the lever point, that's going to go that way. To be able to accurately say, well, the bottom one's going to go to the right, the top one's going to go to the left, which would be answer D. But you see how your brain can manipulate and see movement in its head. That can be a very tricky thing for them to do. And when we give them tasks where we don't actually explain to them or show them very detailed exactly what we want, go tidy up the living room, go organize the garage, go clean up your clothes. Well, how do you want it done? Just, I don't want them on the floor. And one of my favorite ones from my nephew was my sister came in and saw his clothes all over the floor. She goes, "When I get back here, I do not want to see a single item of clothing on this floor." He said, "Okay." Came back 2 minutes later, she's like, "Are you done?" He goes, "Yep." "There's no way you can be done." He goes, "Yeah, I am." She walks in, he stripped the sheets off his bed and his blankets, and he covered up all the stuff on the floor, so she could no longer see a single item of clothing on the floor. He thought he did it good. He didn't understand why she didn't want that, because she never said that he couldn't do that. So he's standing there going, how do I solve this problem? Okay, here's a sheet. How can I don't know. Well, maybe if I can't see them, who knows? So problem solving is something that they often struggle with. And sometimes we need to be very direct with them and very explanatory to them, recognizing that there may be other issues associated with how they process information that aren't associated with their social impairments or other aspects of it. Other ways in which we use our imagination. There we are.
I remember you ever speaking of it, brother.
How many people had a little picture pop into their head of somebody? And what did that picture look like? Was it a 2-year-old little girl? No. How did you make that picture pop into there? It just did. Again, you didn't have to try, it just did.
I'm afraid he's gone out, sir.
How many of you have this picture of this, British lady nanny sitting there at the door going, afraid he's gone outside, talking to somebody about something. Why? Because that's what the voice elicits. The voice automatically makes us think, and our brains categorize this stuff and then give us the right picture from our database of stuff and says, that would be that. And it's easy to do for us. It's really hard for them to do that kind of stuff. So, part of the purpose of tonight was to talk about the impact that having an autism spectrum disorder has on relationships, on information processing, and on the differences therein. We've covered the basics of it, but as you know, each person is an individual. And everybody has very specific things that happen and that they go through. So what I'm going to do now is leave the rest open to a simple question and answer with regards to you guys, your kids, the things that you guys struggle with. If you're looking for information and you want to ask it in this form, this is the time and place to do it. Yes?
So I have a 9-year-old grandson who's on the spectrum, and we are frustrated that he's narrowing down his food choices to about a handful of things where he would eat more when he was a little kid. So he has a memory of eating them,
Mm-hmm.
and he refuses to try new stuff. And
Mhm.
it's hard not to make it into a battle, and it's very hard to be happy about what he's able to take to school for lunch, given the restrictions on schooling.
Right.
Because he would live on peanut butter and jam if he could, but he can't at school.
Right. So that could be one of two things. That could be either Jim or Bob. It could be that he just really loves peanut butter and jam so much that it's all he ever wants to eat. Or it could be that he really doesn't like any other thing. Now, if he used to eat a bunch of stuff, part of the problem with these kids is their brains activate around things that are not the same as other people. Now, how do I know what's bad and dangerous? Well, there's experience. But what I didn't mention, and is also very important, is the social experience. Which means if I see you get bit by the dog, I can become just as afraid of that dog, even though it never actually affected me directly. Furthermore, if I see you walking up to the dog and not being bit, that tells me that maybe the dog isn't as dangerous as I thought it was. So if I don't have this social learning capacity, I don't know that something is okay just because I see you guys doing it. Now, if you're eating something that you're saying, this is good, try it. No, why would I? Because it's good, look, we like it, so what does that have to do with me? It's okay, honest. It's not gonna hurt you. They don't learn from that, they just learn from experience. And if in their experience in the past, for whatever reason, it wasn't exactly the same as it's used to be, then that means it's bad and that means, no, we're done with it. Even if it is exactly the same, their brains may still decide, you know what, I'm bored of it, I'm done with it, I'm not doing it again. But they don't want to test new things because that's a problem. You know, they don't like a lot of stuff. But remember how I said we can use Jim to override Bob? Using my nephew again, he's a great example. He's got so many of these classic things. Very picky eater. He had about 5 things and drove my sister crazy because she's got 6 kids and she does not want to make, you know, one meal for him and then some for everybody else because everybody goes, well, he gets that and I don't. So she would, again, have the battle with him until I told her, look, he likes Mario Kart. She's like, yeah, I know. I said, no, you're not getting it. He likes Mario Kart. What if the only way to get Mario Kart was to try something new? She's like, I don't think he'd ever touch Mario Kart again. I said, really? Because you have no idea the fight that we get into and how determined he is and how adamant he can be to not try anything new. I said, try it. Just try it. You know, just say, from now on, how much Mario Kart you play depends entirely on, did you try something new? If you tried a new food, that will earn you 30 minutes of Mario Kart. And trying a food means 3 bites. Because the first bite, your brain is only going to taste what it expects to taste. So if it expects it to be bad, it's going to be bad. The second bite, you'll actually start to taste the flavor of the food, and by the 3rd bite, that's when you'll know if you actually like it or not. And that very night that she put that into play, he said, okay, and took 3 bites of the food without any problem. Because it was going to get Mario Kart, and Mario Kart to him was more important than not eating the food. And I was actually over at Christmas time one day, and you know, he's very good, he follows the rules, he really likes rules. Rules mean predictability, it means he doesn't have to try and think outside the box. So he follows the rules, so when he's got half hour, it's half hour, and he's very good at following that. But this one day we're sitting there and I'm in the kitchen with her talking, and suddenly he comes running in the kitchen and he starts rifling through the cupboards. And she's like, what are you doing? He's like, looking for something I haven't tried, Mom. And she's like, what? He's like, I just ran out of time, but I'm in the middle of a race. I just holds up a can of beans. He goes, have I tried these? She's like, yeah. Tuna, have I tried these? Yeah. Pulls out salmon. She goes, have I tried these? And she's like, no, but you don't have to try that because, you know what, you try that, I'll give you an hour. Because my sister doesn't like salmon, her husband likes salmon. So she doesn't like crunchy bits. And so he's like, ran over to the kitchen, cranked open the can opener, crammed 3 spoonfuls into his mouth, said, this is good, and ran back. Leaving it on the counter, so she put it in the fridge. What surprised her the most, though, was that when he came back, he went to the fridge, pulled out the can of salmon, and continued to eat it and finish it. And she's like, you know, normally when he tries it, he doesn't actually like it. I said, yeah, but this particular time, it got him a lot of dopamine in his brain. How does the brain learn what it likes? Because there's a release of dopamine. So all his brain really figured out was that the flavor of salmon equaled an hour of this, lots of dopamine, therefore salmon is good. And it became something that he liked and started to fixate on it and go because of Mario Kart. And she maintained the Mario Kart connection to food for until he was about 13 and got his food choices expanded considerably over that time to the point where he was actually willing to try things because he found a bunch of things that he did like once he started to try them. So the strategy to deal with that is you link something that you know they like, that you know is important to them, to trying new things so that you can expand their experience of these things and link it to something that is something that gives dopamine to their brain so their brain learns to like it because of that immediate connection. For that to work, there needs to be immediacy of the reward, so Jim needs to get what he wants right away, as soon as possible after the thing you want them to like, because it's a time linking between the spike of dopamine and what just happened that makes what just happened a good thing because it's tied to dopamine. If it's too far down the road, so if trying something now means in 3 hours you can play this, you may not make that connection. But if doing this right now equals the benefit right now, there's a much better chance that this will turn into something that they actually like. Yeah?
I've heard from families that I work with that they're no longer on the spectrum. So what's changed in the DSM-5 for autism that they may no longer have the diagnosis?
Well, the criteria have changed somewhat. It would not normally be that they would no longer be on the spectrum per se, because if anything, the criteria got looser, not tighter. So it became more inclusive rather than more restrictive. The PDD-NOS category was taken out, which a lot of kids had fallen under initially, which was if they were just kind of weird, quirky kids, but didn't necessarily meet the criteria or have the actual criteria met, they could say, well, that's PDD-NOS, which it may not have been. You can be a little quirky without it being the spectrum. So it really depends on the circumstance and the situation. If they were very, very high functioning, one of the things that happened is that the very high functioning people on the spectrum, especially when they're intelligent, and there's a lot of them that are in positions of authority, positions of prestige, doctors, lawyers, and so on, who kind of object to the whole idea that they are diagnosed with a disorder and prefer to see themselves as being neuroatypical, not neurotypical, just neuroatypical. So I'm different than you in that I don't care about people. That's not a bad thing. I don't care that I don't care about people. It doesn't bother me to not need anybody and to not care about you guys. So don't say that I have a disorder if that's not the case. So for people who were relatively high functioning, they had another category that came along which was labeled a social communication disorder, which is where a lot of the people who would have probably been under the category of Asperger's in that they were socially different, but they didn't have all those fixated interests or a lot of those OCD things, but they were definitely socially different. Now they would fall under that category as opposed to the spectrum, and it's not technically the spectrum, but as I explained, unofficially, it still kind of is the same problem that they're born with. It's just not something that actually causes a ton of impairment in their lives. You know, think Sheldon Cooper, except without the fixation on trains and flags. So if he was just a quirky character that just did what he did but didn't have those fixations, he would be labeled as a social communication disorder. Everybody knows that no, he actually is the classical icon of Asperger's disorder in modern media. Which is funny actually, because the writer never intended for him to be somebody with a disorder on the spectrum. As a matter of fact, for the first 2 years, he insisted that no, he did not have Asperger's or autism or any of this stuff, and he was just a quirky character. Now, I guarantee you that that writer, you know, Laura, he knew somebody that this was based off of. And because it's too perfect. It's too good for it to just be coincidence. So he based this off of a character, and by season 3, he said, okay, no, actually, yeah, no, he does have Asperger's. And so Sheldon started saying, no, yeah, actually I do. Whereas in initial interviews with him, they're like, no, my character doesn't have anything wrong with him. Yeah.
So when it comes to the social piece, do you think it's less, severe at a younger age? Like, I have kids on my caseload in JKSK who are being diagnosed with autism, but then the teachers and the school are saying, but he's social, like he plays with the other kids, like he can't transition or he can't. So then I wonder, like, because when you spoke about puberty and like the thinking and stuff, so could it be that they are more social at a younger age? Not social, because even at that age they parallel play, right?
Exactly. And the difference
But they'll make eye
is,
contact is what they're saying. Like, he'll
No.
look at me in the eye.
sometimes, and it depends on if they've been told to look at you in the eye or not.
Right.
And usually there's a lot of
Okay.
parents, especially when they're younger, like, look at me, look at me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when they look at you and they look at you like this, I know they've been taught to do eye contact, because that's not normal eye contact. You don't just sit and stare at the person.
Okay.
But that's what they do, is they make eye contact. It's just, again, abnormal eye contact. They figured out they're supposed to, but not exactly how. The reason that they don't stand out quite so much socially at a younger age is because of the acceptance of the rest of society about that. You know, any kindergartner is going to be very accepting of any other kid. You know, if you play with me, whatever. If you don't hurt me, you're my friend. You know, I invite everybody in my class to my party. That's just the way it is. So you can be a little weird. I don't care if you come and play or don't play. It doesn't really matter. Once you become older, you start paying attention to those things, and those things start to matter, and they start to mean things. And that's when they start to stand out a lot more, and they tend to start being pushed out to the side because they don't want to go in there. So the best way to think about it is, if they're here and society's over here, sometimes society will come around and do what they're doing, and so it'll look like they're in the group. But as soon as society starts to go off, they're still over here. They do not follow the group. But if society comes back and joins them, they may not stand out again. But they're not doing what everybody else is doing, which is going with everybody else. So that's usually where you see it.
So it doesn't rule out, like, yeah, they're trying to rule out the autism, right?
Yeah, just because somebody can do one thing that you think they may not be able to do doesn't mean that they don't have the disorder. The disorder is not an exclusionary thing where they make eye contact, they can't have autism. Or, you know, they know when I'm happy or not, they can't have autism. It's not that categorical. A lot of it is in the subtlety, and it's in the other things. All these other things are hitting dead on. The fact that they might be able to tell when you're angry or not doesn't really mean a heck of a lot to me, because I don't know how obvious you are. If you're Italian, you're right. Everybody can tell you're angry. People down the road can tell you're angry. So it's not a surprise that your kid can tell when you're angry. You know? So there's a lot of factors that can come into play. Any other questions? Yeah?
We're struggling right now because my daughter has reached puberty phase, lucky us. And the relationship with her sister has completely changed to what it used to be. Because before she was the fun, quirky sister who would just do what she wanted kind of thing. Or it was the fun, quirky sister who would sit on Mario Kart and she knew her sister would play. But now it's kind of like, I don't want to say she's more autistic now, but it's kind of like we went through a phase where we were coping well, everybody was doing good in school, and now it's kind of like we've been hit with a bomb at school and at home, because everything's like back full force, but more in the sense of, I don't know how to get her sister through it, the one who's not on the spectrum, of this is how things are right now, and like how to cope with that.
So dealing with the other kids in the family depends an awful lot on their age and how much they can understand about what's happening to their sibling or the difficulties that their siblings have. Because again, the nonverbal communication, if you are not on the spectrum, your brain knows how to do it right from the start. If as a little kid, I want to go play with you, and so I say, come play with me and you just ignore me, my feelings get hurt. My feelings get hurt, I get angry at you because you're being mean to me. And so I might throw something at you because I'm mad, and then all you see is an annoying little sister that's throwing stuff at you. You certainly don't understand why she wants to keep coming around being with you, so you react negatively to her. And it's a disaster because of all that miscommunication. So a lot of times it's about helping them to understand that, A, they need their time. So I know you want to spend time with them, because usually little siblings want to be with their bigger siblings, and that gets really annoying to the bigger siblings when their interests have changed, and it's not the same things it used to be. Because for the kids, it's not really about the stuff they're doing, it's about, I want to be with my big brother, my big sister. But they don't like that, and they don't want that, and that hurts the feelings. So let them know that's not really what they mean. They don't mean that they don't want to be with you. And, she does like you. She just may not know how to show it right now. The things that you guys used to do, at some point in time, you will probably be doing them again. Just right now, she's got other stuff that she's focusing on, that she's learning and trying to figure out how to do. Certain things take her longer to learn, like how to deal with people. For you, that's an easy thing. For her, that's a hard thing. So we need to be patient and understanding of these things. And you try to explain it as much as they can. When they're too young and they don't get it and there's no point to explaining it, you just make rules of interaction that are going to kind of keep the family separated and free of conflict, if you will. But that's usually the best strategy. Why things implode around puberty? Because they often do. A couple of different reasons. If you're female, hormones. Hormones wreak havoc with your brain. Hormones activate the social part of your brain, but also activate the anxiety neural circuit. So Bob gets louder in girls when they hit puberty. So they naturally become more anxious about things, more restricted, more withdrawn than other people. And they also suddenly may want social interaction or may not, or feel or be judged by it. And so the social life becomes very stressful for them and exhausting. And oftentimes, that's it, they're done, they've decided they're just never going to school again, or never going in a certain place. Or sometimes they go to the other end and it's like, no, actually I like this boy, so I'm gonna go out with them every night and I'm gonna do whatever I want, and you can't stop me because I'm old enough now to do whatever I want. And then they drive you crazy because you're like, the danger, the risk you're putting yourself in, they're like, what's the problem? I'm fine. Well, yeah, but bad things could happen. No, because they're not thinking in the future, and they're focusing on what they want, and away they go. But anxiety is probably the more common aspect of what you see. And the difficulty with puberty is also the following. The human body is a biological machine that has a timing switch attached to it around reproduction. That timing switch leads to several different things that can be really problematic for kids on the spectrum. Number one, changes. They don't like change. They really don't like it when their body changes without their permission. And if they do not want it to change, it really gets annoying and frustrating when it changes again and continues to change. But that's what puberty is. There's always, it's a continuum. Over years, everything's going to be changing, and that can drive them crazy. There's a lot of stuff that you have to start to do to be socially accepted, like showering regularly. Like, who does that? Seriously, who cares how you smell? Everybody else in the house. So it needs to be a rule. You just shower every day. As soon as you hit 12, you're showering every day, period. I do not care. If you want to play Mario Kart, you're showering every day. But you have to make the rules tied to the things that matter to them. Dealing with menstrual cycles can be very distressing, disturbing for them because they don't understand it. And again, the fact that everybody else goes through this and that it is a normal thing and something that is supposed to be reassuring, and to them it doesn't serve that purpose. So it's still a terrifying experience to suddenly be bleeding and they're like, I want this to stop now. You can't, or actually you can. You can piggyback birth control pills over top of each other over and over and over again to eliminate the cycle, which can oftentimes eliminate some of the difficulties associated with that if that is a problem for them. So not only are there changes, but then there's the drives, the interest. And probably about half the time, because Jim is not interested in people. Jim is still not interested in people, even at a biological level. And a lot of these kids, they just really have no interest in relationships of any sort. You know, are you sexually attracted to boys, girls, both? What? You know, physically, who do you find yourself attracted to? You're weird. Well, no, actually it happens. No, not gonna happen ever. And sometimes they're right, it never happens. And they never develop a desire for anybody to be around them. Or they develop a desire for a romantic friend, but not a friend that actually touches them in any way, shape, or form. Just, you know, a relationship friend. So that can be a problem. With boys, it's usually not quite as predictably not there. In fact, it's often a problem with the boys on the spectrum because testosterone is a very powerful hormone that changes things, and if they do not know how to properly approach this, they can get themselves into a lot of trouble. So especially teenage boys, they need very rigid rules. A lot of very rigid rules about what is or isn't okay when it comes to socially interacting with the other gender, or with people in general, around anything related to sex. And rule number one, you don't go up to people and ask them to have sex. Like, you don't do that. Not to the waitress, not to the teacher, not to people. Inappropriate. Like, but why? Because it's a rule. And they don't understand what is a socially acceptable relationship or not. And because they're all online, they can sometimes find themselves in very predatory relationships without realizing it, because they've got a friend that they're going to go meet. Who's this friend? Oh, it's a friend from the chat group. Well, how old are they? I don't know. You didn't ask? No. But you're going to go meet them after school? Yeah. No. Why not? Because you don't know who that is. Yeah, I do. They're my friend from the chat group. Yeah, but you've never met them. I know. That's why I'm going to meet them. Do they know how old you are? I don't know. Did you tell them that you're 12? No. Why not? I don't know. So they can put themselves into very dangerous situations. So they need a lot of supervision in that area. The other thing that is often commonplace in these kids, and that stems from their difficulty with social integration, recognizing what and who they are and where they belong, yet also developing the desire to be something, is the issue of gender. There is a tremendously higher degree of gender non-conforming individuals in the spectrum compared to not on the spectrum. And it's thought that the reason for that is that when they're in that early stage of puberty, trying to figure out themselves, developing their mindset of, who am I? A sense of identity, which everybody goes through in those early teen years, their brains realize that they don't feel like they fit. They don't feel like they fit with guys, because they're not like other guys. And if you're either a guy or a girl, then that must mean that I'm a girl. Or they don't fit with girls, therefore I must be a guy. Or they don't fit with guys or girls, therefore I must be gender neutral. And over the last 5 years, there's been an explosion of gender labels that I can't even keep up with. And I hear new ones every day from, oh, I'm gender diverse. What does that mean? Well, it means that it depends on what I feel like. So your gender depends on what you feel like? Yeah. What can it be? I don't know. Some days I'm a girl, some days I'm a guy, some days I'm a girl guy, some days I'm a guy girl, some days I'm a gay girl, and it's confusing. But the problem is that they don't know where they fit. And this can sometimes lead to other problems, because the issue with wanting to transition is one that is a medical decision that can have a lot of consequences. And if they're doing it to try to find their place, to try and see if they fit, unfortunately I've seen too many make transitions and still end up feeling in exactly the same way that they did before they transitioned. Still feeling like they don't fit, still feeling like they don't belong, and like this isn't what they want. But by that point, it's too late, because you've been on hormones, you've changed your body over the last 3 or 4 years, and you can't just change your mind and say, okay, no, it doesn't get done. So it can be a very challenging time for parents to know what to do, for teenagers to figure out what to do, to figure themselves out. But they can often be very, very determined and say, no, 100% guarantee, I know this is what it is. And when parents try to say, well, but think about the future, a lot of times you just run into that, well, no, this is me, this is what I am, this is what I'm doing. And how do you handle that? It's a tricky question. Any other questions? Yep.
When you're dealing with like a teenage girl and the thing, dealing with our daughter's dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety, recent diagnosis, and trying to help them when they're having episodes and having to distance themselves from school, distance themselves from even us, just because they're essentially overloaded and that sort of thing. Do you have any tips in terms of how to help them as soon as possible? It's very difficult.
If the anxiety is a result of sensory overload, which is a common problem with these kids, what sensory overload means is that Bob has in his list of bad things a certain sound, a certain texture, a certain feel, a certain touch, that when it experiences it, dumps noradrenaline, serotonin into the brain, and literally makes them feel like they're about to die. So when they say that, I hate that sound, my little brother chewing, it just makes me want to strangle him, or, I hate being around him. It really does literally hurt. And they have physiologic activation of this fear center when they experience these sounds, these touches, these smells, these tastes. And the problem with that is either you have to link it in a very powerful way relatively early on to something that is good, so that you flip the switch on that and you tie it to a lot of dopamine through a lot of repetitive linking to good stuff, or you're going to need to use some sort of medication to block that activation, because it's a very real problem that is brain-based more so than anything else. And that's often part of what leads to some of these anxiety attacks, is a sensory overload, and they don't know why, because they can't identify exactly what it is. And in large part, the problem with, again, is those emotions from either none or extreme, because that's all they know. Anything that's going to activate anxiety is going to activate like a panic attack, not just a little bit of anxiety. They don't do that, so it's always an extreme to the other extreme. Helping them through that is more often than not going to be a medication issue, rather than just helping to teach them to cope and to develop strategies. The reason strategies and typical therapy doesn't work for these kids is they don't have the same wiring. When we teach somebody how to regulate anxiety through CBT, through thinking about this, and when you feel the anxiety coming, you need to put these strategies in place so that you can decrease the anxiety, and so on and so forth. It's basically like explaining to somebody what to do when they see the dimmer switch start to go up. If their house never had a dimmer switch, it just has on or off, they have no idea what you're talking about. And they have no way of ever doing those strategies, because it's either on or it's not. So when you tell them, when you feel it coming on, they're like, it's too late. As soon as they feel it, it is at that peak. And they're not wrong. It's the same thing with anger. When you feel yourself getting angry, they can be fine, and then bang, they're enraged and throwing stuff, and you're like, oh, where did that come from? 2 seconds ago, you were fine. And then 2 minutes later, they're done and they're back, and they're like, so can we go for ice cream? You're like, okay, that's pretty crazy. A lot of parents feel like it's bipolar, but it's not. It's just the fact that emotions are either on or off, and the flipping of the switch. So the typical strategies, again, don't really work in teaching them this. So a lot of it comes down to managing the environment. If you know what triggers her, if you can identify what is a problem, as much as possible, try to eliminate those triggers. If it's something that she needs to do, so it's like going to be around people, going to do things, you have to tie it to something that she likes. Other than medication, it's the only strategy that is going to work, is to use a very rigid behavioral linking of good stuff to this. Now, when they have their fixations basically mean that for Jim, a ton of dopamine. It's like an addiction, literally, in their brain. They love this stuff. If you can control access to that, you have a very powerful tool at your hands that can help them get past a lot of anxiety, a lot of sensory stuff, if that's the only way to get access to this. I remember this one kid, he wouldn't go to school. We tried everything. The problem was he would sit there all day and just draw circles. He'd love to draw circles on paper with pencils. And so his parents were like, we don't know what we can use as a reward. And I said, the pencil and the paper. Wait, so you want us to not let him use pencils and paper? I said, if that's what he's doing for hours a day, that's what his brain really likes. It doesn't matter if it's not the typical thing. If this is what they are choosing to spend their time, that tells you their brain really gets a lot of dopamine from this. And we need something that gives a lot of dopamine to their brain to link it to this thing that they need to do. As soon as all the paper and pencils disappeared from the house, first day they had a meltdown. The next day he went to school so that he could come home and draw circles. The parents said it's the weirdest thing, but like, who would put up with that for drawing a circle? But he really loved drawing circles. That was his thing. So if you know that they've got these fixations or things, using those as a contingent reward, and for it to be a reward means that it has to not be there first. Jim can only want what he doesn't have. If Jim already has it, it's not going to be something that you can use as a reward. It's only something that can be used as a punishment to take away something that they already have, as a negative. A reward is you're dangling a carrot that they don't have yet. So for teenage girls, a lot of times it's the cell phone, it's social media, and a lot of parents say, I tried that. I tried telling them, if you don't go to school, you're not going to get your cell phone. If they don't go to school, I take the cell phone away. They get mad, yeah. And it just doesn't work because then, they haven't had a cell phone for weeks now. Yeah. You still haven't used it as a reward yet because it's a punitive measure. And once they stop having it, they forget that they cared about it and it makes no difference anymore. The way you use it as a reward is you decide that you tell them, all right, so today you can get the cell phone if you choose to go to school. You can use the cell phone for the rest of the day as soon as you get home. If you don't, that's fine. No one's going to force you, but it just means that you won't be able to use a cell phone because you haven't done the job. Think of it like a job. You go to work, you get the paycheck. If you don't go to work, you don't expect a paycheck. If you want a paycheck, you've got to go to work. It's up to you whether you go to work or not. But that's the only way to get the paycheck. And so I'm never stopping you from getting the paycheck. I'm just waiting for you to decide that it's worth your while to do it. And if they really like it and want it, remember I said the anxiety will spike quickly and may stop them, but it fades? If they do not have it, but they're sitting there staring at it, and they're looking at it, and they could get it, and it's in their grasp, all they need to do is do something to get it, they will do it. They always do, because their brains are hardwired to need to get what they want. So that's about the only behavioral strategy that will work in those circumstances, either that or medication. Yeah?
You were talking about the social hierarchy, communication. You spoke about that and kind of when you're diagnosing. Is there a large or noticeable difference between boys and girls? Is there something that boys lean towards or girls lean towards a noticeable difference that you see is different? Or
In terms of the social hierarchy?
yeah, or even communication. Because I know you said like.
Yeah, girls often tend to not have as noticeable deficits in the nonverbal communication. They can sometimes seem to be okay in how they present it. So it's almost like their brains learn to mimic a little better, but still don't actually know what they're doing. Whereas boys don't tend to mimic as well. So there's a lot more girls that I will see where the immediate interaction does not leave me thinking they're on the spectrum, but over time, you're like, well, okay, maybe not. And then as you delve a little deeper, you're going, Whereas for boys, within the first few minutes, I can usually tell because the social interactions are just very often different. So boys don't tend to be as good at that whole nonverbal communication thing, even down the road. In terms of how girls or boys handle the lack of hierarchy, always tougher for guys, for fathers to deal with it than for moms. Moms are kind of not really expecting the kid to do exactly what they say. So dads tend to have a more difficult time with the kid challenging their authority, and often leads to a lot of power struggles of, I'm the father, you're going to listen to me, blah, 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 because I'm the alpha, and it doesn't work so well. Any other questions? No? Okay. So then we will end there. Thank you all for coming. I hope it was informative and you guys got what you needed from it.
I'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Templeman. That was a very informative session. I know I loved Bob and Jim. Love the dopamine reward versus punishment, because I know I could have used some help from that department with the school system for a lot of years. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, they need to use it for schools because
Yes.
they don't want to learn just to be like everybody else. So to learn something, they need a reward.
Punishments
They
don't
need
work.
it. No, they don't care about punishment.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.